It begins with something small, a creak in the floorboards, a shadow that shouldn't be there. You tell yourself it's nothing until you feel it. That heavy, suffocating presence in the room. You're not alone, and the house knows you've noticed. Some houses don't just have stories, they have warnings. These are the places where stepping inside means risking everything, because once you're in, you might never make it out. All across the world, there are houses where something lingers, something that refuses to leave. Homes marked by tragedy, where the past claws its way into the present. People who entered full of life and left in pieces, if they left at all. These are not just haunted houses. They're places where the boundary between the living and the dead has been torn apart. Tonight, we'll take you deep into 4 of the most terrifying homes ever known. Each one carries a history of fear, suffering, and death. And each one still whispers to those brave or foolish enough to step inside. What ties these houses together is not just the fear they've caused, but the secrets they've buried. And if you listen closely, you might hear them calling you too. Are you ready to know what waits behind their doors? Stay with us, if you're sure you want to find out. Story 1. The Amityville Horror House. On November 13, 1974, this quiet neighborhood in Amityville became the site of a brutal tragedy. Inside this home, 6 members of the DeFeo family were murdered as they slept. Their killer was one of their own. Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest son, confessed to the murders. He claimed he heard voices telling him to do it. But what no one knew then was that this house wasn't just the backdrop of horror, it was a catalyst for something far darker. George and Kathy Lutz thought they'd found their dream home, a beautiful Dutch colonial with room for their family of 5. But they didn't know the horrors waiting for them inside. From the moment they moved in, the house felt wrong. George couldn't shake the cold that seeped into his bones, no matter how high he turned up the heat. And then, the disturbances began. Green slime oozed from the walls. Faucets dripped with a red, blood-like substance. No matter how hard they cleaned, it kept coming back. Their dog, Harry, would snarl and bark uncontrollably at empty corners of the house, his hackles raised, as if seeing something no one else could. One night, their young daughter claimed she'd made a new friend, a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. George dismissed it as a nightmare until he saw the eyes himself, staring back at him through a second-story window. Every night, George woke up at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same time Ronald DeFeo had murdered his family. The house seemed alive, feeding on their fear, turning them against one another. They tried to fight it, but the darkness was relentless. After only 28 days, the Lutz family fled in the dead of night, leaving all their belongings behind. They never returned. The Amityville house still stands today, a grim reminder of what lingers within. Some say the darkness left when the Lutz family fled. Others aren't so sure. Would you dare spend a single night inside? Or is this one house better left to its ghosts? Story 2. The Winchester Mystery House. In the quiet town of San Jose, California, stands a house unlike any other. A mansion built by a woman tormented by a fear she couldn't escape. Fear of the very thing her family had created. A fear that drove her to build and build until she could build no more. Sarah Winchester was the widow of William Wirt Winchester, the heir to the fortune of the infamous rifle that bore their name. After his death, Sarah was plagued by grief, but more than that, by an unshakable belief that the spirits of those killed by her family's weapon were out for revenge. Desperate to appease the vengeful spirits, she sought the help of a medium. The medium, it said, gave her a chilling message. She must build a house, a massive one, without stopping, forever, so that the spirits would never find rest. Sarah Winchester built endless staircases, some leading to dead ends. She believed that if she didn't keep building, the spirits would find her, and take her family's soul with them. There are countless doors in the Winchester house, hundreds, that open into nothing, a maze of false entries and exits, created to confuse and misdirect. Some say the house itself is a kind of prison, designed to trap the spirits in eternal confusion. just as Sarah herself was trapped by her own terror. There are rooms that nobody speaks of, hidden passages, secret stairwells, and hallways that lead nowhere, all built in the dead of night with no plans, no blueprints, only the whispers of spirits guiding her hand. It's said that Sarah never slept, working into the early hours of the morning, hammering away at the house. But some say the hammering didn't stop when she died. To this day, visitors to the Winchester house report strange sounds, loud hammering, the clatter of tools in the dead of night. Some say they've seen Sarah herself, a veiled figure wandering the halls, still working, still building, as if the spirits are never satisfied. Some visitors who've dared to stay overnight have reported feeling the cold, the sudden drop in temperature, as if someone or something was watching. The hammering never stops, and neither does the restless spirit of Sarah Winchester, still building, still running from the ghosts of the past. The house remains a twisted, endless testament to Sarah Winchester's fear. But the question remains, is the house still haunted by the spirit she tried to escape? Or is Sarah herself still trapped inside, lost in the labyrinth she created? Some say the spirits never left, and maybe they never will. Story 3. The Enfield Poltergeist House. In 1977, a small house in Brimsdown, England, became the site of one of the most terrifying and well-documented poltergeist cases in history. A haunting that left a family in terror and the world questioning what is truly real. The Hodgson family, a mother named Peggy and her 4 children, moved into their new home with hope and excitement, but their new life would quickly turn into a nightmare. It began innocently enough, with strange knocking sounds coming from the walls. But then the real terror started. One evening, while the family sat in the living room, the furniture began to move of its own accord, chairs scraping across the floor, tables violently rattling. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a trick of the eye. It was the unseen force of a malevolent spirit intent on tormenting the family. The most disturbing incident was when Janet, only 11 years old, began to levitate in front of witnesses, rising from the floor, her body twisted unnaturally. No one could explain it. No one knew what was happening, but one thing was clear. The house was no longer just haunted. It was alive with terror. Among the terrifying phenomena was a voice, captured on audio recordings, that spoke through young Janet. The voice belonged to Bill, a man who had supposedly died in the house many years earlier. His voice was cold, raspy, and it seemed to speak only to Janet. As the events escalated, investigators were called to the house, trying to make sense of the supernatural occurrences. But they quickly realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they anticipated. Despite their efforts, the investigators were unable to calm the spirit. It wasn't just moving objects, it was tormenting the family, pulling children from their beds, slamming doors, even throwing heavy furniture. Some would say it was a battle for the souls of those who lived there. As the paranormal events reached their peak, Janet's possession became undeniable. The voice of Bill grew stronger, more malicious, and no matter how many exorcisms they attempted, nothing seemed to stop the evil that had gripped the house. The Enfield poltergeist case remains one of the most chilling and debated hauntings of all time. Despite the exorcisms and investigations, no one can say for certain. Was it all real, or was it an elaborate hoax? One thing is clear, the house still waits, and the spirits of Enfield are not at rest. Is the Enfield poltergeist still waiting? Is there more to this story, or is it only just beginning? Story 4. The Villisca Axe Murder House. Villisca, Iowa, a small town overshadowed by a brutal crime that left no answers, only whispers. In 1912, the Moore family and 2 young guests were butchered in their sleep, murdered in a way so horrific, the house itself still shudders with the memory. The killer was never caught, but the spirits of the victims remain, trapped in this house. On the night of June 9, 1912, the Moore family, Josiah, Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 guests, were slaughtered in their sleep. The killer, armed with an axe, crept through the house, leaving a trail of blood and silence in his wake. But what made this murder so terrifying wasn't just the brutality. It was the calm after the storm. No one heard a thing. No one saw a thing. The killer vanished into the night, and the truth was lost forever. Those who have dared to enter the house at night report hearing screams, faint, desperate cries for help that seem to echo from the walls themselves. It's as if the spirits of the children, their voices forever lost in death, are calling out for someone to hear them. Visitors have reported the doors slamming on their own. One moment, they're standing still. The next, the door crashes shut as if something is trying to keep them inside, or perhaps trying to stop them from leaving. Most disturbing of all is the sense of being watched. Many who have stepped inside report an overwhelming feeling of paranoia, as if unseen eyes are following their every move, waiting for something to happen, waiting for them to make a mistake. The attic, where the killer is said to have waited, hidden in the shadows, the murderer watched over his victims. The chilling silence of this room is a constant reminder of the evil that unfolded within these walls. The EVPs captured inside the house are terrifying. Some say the voices are the spirits of the victims, crying out for justice. But others believe that the voice isn't from the innocent souls who perished in this house, but from something darker, something far more malevolent that still haunts these walls. The spirits of the victims may linger, trapped in the house, but is something else still watching from the shadows? Something that feeds off fear? Something that cannot rest? The Villisca Axe Murder House remains a dark monument to the unspeakable horror that unfolded within its walls. Visitors leave shaken, haunted by the voices they hear, the sights they witness, and the feeling that something is still waiting in the shadows. We ventured into the heart of darkness, exploring 4 houses where the line between the living and the dead blurs beyond recognition. The Amityville Horror House, with its tortured past and relentless presence. The Winchester Mystery House, a twisted maze built in desperation to appease vengeful spirits. The Enfield Poltergeist House, where malevolent forces tormented a family, leaving behind whispers of doubt. And finally, the Villisca Axe Murder House, where a brutal crime left echoes of fear that still linger in the shadows. The stories of these homes are far from over. They stand, untouched by time, holding secrets and shadows that refuse to be forgotten. But as you hear their stories, remember this. The next time you pass a house that feels wrong, when the hair on your neck stands on end, when the air grows thick with tension, trust your instincts. Sometimes it's better to turn away and never look back. After all, some doors are meant to stay closed. Which of these haunted houses would you never dare to visit? Or do you have a ghost story of your own? Perhaps you've experienced something that sent a chill down your spine, something you can't explain. Share it with us in the comments below, and let's see if the spirits are trying to reach us all. If these haunted houses didn't scare you enough, wait until you hear about the cursed towns next week. Some towns have been abandoned for a reason. Whispers of a curse so dark, it drives people away, never to return. What dark secrets are hidden behind the cobblestone streets and abandoned buildings? Stay tuned, if you dare. The darkness is always watching, and it's waiting for you.